appears about 90 times in the Hebrew Bible in reference to various gods. The priests of the Canaanite Baal are mentioned numerous times, most prominently in the first books of Kings. Many scholars believe that this describes Jezebel's attempt to introduce the worship of the Baal of Tyre Malkart to the Israelite capital, Samaria, in the 9th century BCE. Against this, Day argues that Jezebel's Baal was more probably Baal Shemim, the Lord of the Heavens, a title most often applied to Hadad, who is also often titled as Baal, and he's also Isker in the Sumerian/Akkadian pantheon as well. We went over that just last week, I believe. Okay. 1 Kings 18 records an account of a contest between the prophet Elijah and Jezebel's priest. Both sides offer a sacrifice to their respective gods. Baal failed to light his followers' sacrifice, while Yahweh's heavenly fire burnt Elijah's altar to ashes, even after it had been soaked with water. The observers then followed Elijah's instructions to slay the priest of Baal, after which it began to rain, showing Yahweh's mastery over the weather. Other references to the priests of Baal describes their burning of incense in prayer and their offering of sacrifice while adorned in special vestments. Now Yahweh, the title Baal was a synonym in some contexts of the Hebrew Adon, Lord, and Adonai, my Lord, still used as aliases of the Lord of Israel, Yahweh. According to some scholars, the early Hebrews did use the name Baal, Lord, and Baali, my Lord, in reference to the Lord of Israel, just as Baal, farther north, designated the Lord of Ugarit. Just as Baal, farther north, designated the Lord of Ugarit or Lebanon. This occurred both directly and as the divine element of some Hebrew theophoric names. However, according to others, it is not certain that the name Baal was definitely applied to Yahweh in early Israelite history. The component Baal in proper names is mostly applied to worshippers of Baal or descendants of the worshippers of Baal. Names including the element Baal presumably is reference to Yahweh. Include the judge Gideon, also known as Jerubbaal-lit, the Lord strives. Saul's son Eshbaal, the Lord is great, and David's son Bealiah, the Lord knows. The name Bealiah, the Lord of Yahweh, is Baal. Combine the two. However, John Day states that as far as the name Ishbaal, Meribbaal, and Bealiah, that is Baaliah, are concerned, it is not certain whether they simply allude to the Canaanite god Baal or are tending to equate Yahweh with Baal or having no connection to Baal. It was the program of Jezebel in the 9th century BCE to introduce into Israel's capital city into the Israel capital city of Samaria, her Phoenician worship of Baal, as opposed to the worship of Yahweh that made the name anathema to the Israelites. Anathema. The name anathema to the Israelites. At first, the name Baal was used by the Jews for their god without discrimination, but as the struggle between the two religions developed, the name Baal was given up by the Israelites as a thing of shame, and even names like Jerubbaal were changed to Jerubasheth. Jerubasheth. Hebrew Basheth means shame. Okay, so Eshbaal became Ishbasheth, and Meribah-el became Mephibosheth, but other possibilities also occurred. Gideon's name, Jerubbaal, was mentioned intact but glossed as a mockery of the Canaanite god, implying that he strove in vain. Now, there are tons of citations which are needed here. Ishbaal became Ishbasheth, and that says citation needed. This right here is original research. The material near this tag possibly contains original research. And that goes with this for Mephibosheth. And that is, and Meribah became Mephibosheth. Now, here it says original research as well, and that says that Gideon's name, Jerubbaal, was mentioned intact but glossed as a mockery of the Canaanite god, implying that he strove in vain, and that was original research. So, direct use of Baali continued at least as late as the time of the prophet Hosea, who reproached the Israelites for doing so. Brad E. Keeley, or Kell, has suggested that reference to cultic sexual practices in the worship of Baal in Hosea 2 are evidence of an historical situation in which Israelites were either giving up Yahweh worship for Baal or blending the two. Hosea's reference to sexual acts being metaphors for Israelite apostasy. Now, Baal-bereth, Lord of the Covenant, was a god worshipped by the Israelites when they went astray after the death of Gideon, according to the Hebrew scriptures. The same source relates that Gideon's son, Abimelech, went to his mother's kin at Shechem and received 70 shekels of silver from the house of Baal-bereth to assist in killing his 70 brothers from Gideon's other wives. An earlier passage had made Shechem the scene of Joshua's covenant between all the tribes of Israel, In El Yahweh, our God is Israel, and a later one describes it as the location of the house of El Berith. It is thus unclear whether the false worship of the Baalim being decreed is the worship of a new idol or rites and teachings, placing Yahweh as a mere local god within the larger pantheon. The Hebrew scriptures record the worship of Baal threatening Israel from the time of the judges until the monarchy. However, during the period of judges, such worship seems to have been an occasional deviation from a deeper and more constant worship of Yahweh. Throughout all the stories of judges, the popular faith of Yahweh runs as a powerful current. Thus, faith rises the judges and inspires poets, prophets, and Nazarites. Worship of Baal and Ashtoreth has been schematically interspersed between three chapters, but no trace of a vital popular belief in any foreign god can be detected in the stories themselves. Baal prophets appeared in Israel centuries later, but during the ages of the judges, when Israel is supposed to have been most deeply affected by the religion of Canaan, there are no Baal priests or prophets, nor any other imitation of a vital effect of polytheism in Israel life. The Deuteronomists in the present form of Jeremiah seem to phrase the struggle as monolatry or monotheism against polytheism. Yahweh is frequently identified in the Hebrew scriptures as El Elyon. However, this was after a conflation with El in a process of religious syncretism. El, Hebrew, and then the Hebrew writing, I can't say that, became a generic term form meaning God, as opposed to the name of a worship deity, and epithets such as El Shaddai came to be applied to Yahweh alone, while Baal's nature as a storm and weather god became assimilated into Yahweh's own identification with the storm. In the next stage, the Yahwist religion separated itself from its Canaanite heritage, first by rejecting Baal worship in the 9th century, then through the 8th to the 6th century with the prophetic condemnation of Baal sun worship, on the high places, practices pertaining to the dead, and other matters. Beelzebub occurs in the 1st century of the 2nd book of Kings as the name of the Philistine god of Ekron. In it, Ahaziah, king of Israel, is said to have consulted the priest of Baal-zebub as to whether he would survive the injuries from his recent fall. The prophet Elijah, incensed at this impiety, then foretold that he would die quickly, raining heavenly fire on the soldiers sent to punish him for doing so. Jewish scholars have interpreted the title of Lord of the Flies as the Hebrew way of calling Baal a pile of dung and his followers vermin, although others argue for a link to power over causing the curing pestilence and thus suitable for Ahaziah's question. The Septuagint renders the names of Beelzebub and as Baal of flies.